a motion to, I'm going to ask for an motion to amend the agenda. And the reason for that is we have a report from MHEC's Student Advisory Council. They have voted on some recommendations regarding 2024 elections and student participation, and they didn't make this vote until this past Saturday after our agenda had already been made public. So if I could ask my fellow commissioners for a motion to add the Student Advisory Council's report to our agenda.
I move that we add the item as requested.
Thank you, Vice Chair Agu. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Tabor-Stalen. We will add that to our agenda and we'll put it right after we approve minutes a little further down in the agenda. First order of business is remarks from the acting secretary and me. I will start briefly and just to say in this very busy holiday season, particularly busy time of year for the students that we serve, I wanted to thank everyone in our institutions of higher education, all of our professionals, staff members, professors, as well as the staff of the Maryland Higher Education Commission. It's been a very, very busy season. Lots of changes coming to financial aid, which we're going to talk about, and particularly as we strive to continue to be a student-focused organization, I want to thank all of the professionals who work with our students and thank our students for all of their hard work, including our student commissioner, Commissioner Robinson, who's joining us today despite being in the middle of finals. Thank you for all that you are doing to the professionals and to the students to better our state. It's been we're going to hear later about just how busy the Maryland Higher Education Commission agency staff has been. We've had two very successful events over the past month. The financial aid town hall, which we had in early November, which has received close to 1,000 views online, as well as the very successful campus safety summit that we co-led with the University System of Maryland this past Monday. And we're going to get a report from Mr. Coley about that. But again, just to thank the team at MHEC for going in above and beyond these last couple months. And with that, I will turn it over to Secretary Rai.
Thank you, Chair Martz. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for your time this morning. I also want to add my thanks to all faculty and staff across all institutions of higher education in our state. They are helping 327,000 students. We have that many students in our institutions of higher education. We all come from a background, either from a student or associated with higher education. This is a very important time for our students. Final exams are coming, final papers are due. They're all doing best, so we want to wish them. We want to thank everyone, faculty, staff, who are engaged in helping our students in providing, one of the best learning environments that's out there. Having said that, as Chair Mott said, we are busy, but we are busy with some really good work. This week started Monday with Campus Safety Summit. You'll hear a lot about it. As you know, campus safety, gun violence, and other kinds of violence on college campuses across the country is an important issue. We got together as a state collectively, all institutions of higher education in collaboration with the University System of Maryland to study the national best practices and how to provide a safe learning environment for our students. That was Monday. Tuesday, we joined our colleagues across the country in Washington, D.C. with Lumina Foundation in peer learning opportunity. How other states are looking at challenges and opportunities that are there for higher education, whether it is demographic changes, equity-based opportunity, how do we provide access to higher education and post-secondary opportunities to all residents in the state, or how do we bring better integration and connection between higher education and workforce development. That was a wonderful day. I want to thank Commissioner Agu for being there for an entire day in DC, but also being very active. As you know, he has significant expertise in those areas. Our peers from other states also learn a lot by our commissioners' participation there. Today, we are having our commission meeting, great items here on the agenda. You will hear a lot about our Office of Student Financial Assistance. They are being very proactive in a slightly emerging situation with all the changes in FAFSA and a lot of unknowns. Within those unknowns, how can we provide best support to students in Maryland? You will hear from our Office of Research and Policy Analysis and fall enrollment trend. I will not take their thunder, but I think there is some good news there. After a decade of decline, we are getting some better news, and then more details on campus safety summit. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Rai. The next item on the agenda is public comments. I don't believe we have any public comments. Is that right, Ms. Ng?
Yes, that's correct. There were no public comments.
Thank you. Now moving to commission minutes approval. We have two sets of minutes to approve, the minutes from our August 9th meeting and our September 7th meeting. I'll start with the August 9th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the commission's August 9th meeting?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the August 9th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Thank you, Commissioner Howe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. And now moving to our September 7th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. Second?
Second.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Agu spoke first. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? All right. We will now move to the item that I mentioned before, and I think in my haste, I called for a motion to make an addition to the agenda. I'm not sure I actually called for a vote. So just in the interest of, to be totally correct, is there can I have the commission vote on whether to add this agenda item to our meeting? Again, the agenda item being the recommendations from the Student Advisory Council about next year's elections. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Right. Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Dr. Dow, who's going to introduce the chair of the Student Advisory Council.
Great. Thank you, Chair Motz. Good morning, commissioners. It is nice to see you. A little bit of background about these advisory councils and what is before you. As some of you may know, there are several councils that are created by law that are intended to advise the commission and therefore are advisory councils. In particular, we have a student advisory council, a faculty advisory council, we have a financial aid advisory council, and a number of other advisory councils. These councils will make recommendations to the commission on a variety of issues. Those recommendations often come at the end of the academic year. So the commission often receives an annual report from the advisory councils, making, again, recommendations on a number of topics. What our chair of the Student Advisory Council today will speak about is recommendations specific to the 2024 elections. They have identified some specific action items that can happen in the spring semester and in particular and into the summer. So they decided it was important to not wait until the annual report to put forward this recommendation for the commission and the secretary to consider action on. So that is just a little bit of background information. With that, I will turn it over to Alexis Faison. She is our chair this year of our Student Advisory Council. So Ms. Faison, take it away.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Oh,
yeah. So when the Student Advisory Commission was set up, or the council was set up, what was the kind of guideline for what the commission? I mean, I understand that on certain academic things, but it's supposed to be student input on it. But like in this case, like how does that fall in? I mean, elections. I'm just like, we ask a lot of universities and colleges, so a lot, I mean, to do certain reports and follow up with certain data. how much more do we put on them? And is it within our purview of, as a commission, to be asking this?
Emily, I think you're on mute.
Dr. Dow, I think you're on mute.
Goodness, I am so sorry. Commissioner Serrano, thank you for that question. I think that is maybe something to discuss with your fellow commissioners in terms of next steps. Chair Motz, I defer to you on how you want to proceed.
I think we could have the student present. She's here, right? The chair?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's have Ms. Faison present the recommendation and then open it up for discussion. Does that work?
Does that work for you, Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, that works.
I think it's, we always love having student input. I mean, that's the reason for our commission. So welcome, Ms. Faison. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, first of all, I just want to thank you all so much for your time. I know you have a very busy agenda, so thank you for making time for me to be here this morning. My name is Alexis Faison. I'm a senior at Loyola University, Maryland, and I have been serving as the chairperson for MHEC Student Advisory Council for the past 2-3 months now. And today I would like to share the recommendation that we have voted upon regarding voting and civic engagement for higher ed institutions. So our council has had several conversations as to what we would like to have out of this recommendation. We've recommended this in the past. However, with the upcoming 2024 election for president and a few other upcoming elections, we wanted to ensure that there was an opportunity for students to be able to get out and vote, but also having the resources to do so. We realize that every institution responds differently in their ability to cater to this, but we wanted to have one set recommendation in that regard. So I'll just read our general preamble. So as the representatives of the Maryland Student Voice to the Commission, we recommend that Maryland institutions make a sustained effort to empower students to be active participants in the civic process of elections, including removing the barriers that obstruct students from voting, such as reducing barriers such as attendance requirements for the 2024-2025 academic year and lack of guidance in the voting process, providing resources and supports to students to participate as election judges, providing accommodations and resources to out-of-state students, and generally encourage students to participate in our democratic process. So these were all items that were named by the council that we incorporated as a general recommendation. And then if you have the ability to scroll through the memo, there is also additional supports in facilitating those recommendations. And we broke them up specifically by a semester basis. And at the end of this recommendation, we acknowledge that the integration timeline will be different for every single institution. This won't happen as we have laid out. However, we figured this would be the best way to have this presented to the commission and presented to departments of academic affairs and student affairs for consideration. So I would be happy to answer any questions regarding this recommendation, and just thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Faison. Do we have any questions from our commission? No? Commissioner Agu. I think you might be on mute.
Sorry, can folks hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. And before I speak, I know Commissioner Serrano raised a question. I have something more tactical in terms of the recommendations, but I don't know if we want to potentially try and address Commissioner Serrano's question about scope. But I have some tactical questions. So Commissioner Serrano, I'm happy to yield the floor in a second if you want to say more here.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead with your question? And I mean,
Sure.
why don't we get, since we have the benefit of Ms. Faison, who like us is a volunteer in her
Fair enough.
capacity
Fair enough.
and may need
So-
to get back to her classes. Let's get some, all of our questions about the substance
Sure.
of the recommendations, and then we can get to the process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. I know it was a bit of a long time ago for me, but I know this is a busy time of year for students. So thank you for you and all of your fellow advisory council members. So two things you're trying to get at in the recommendations is, one, how do you reduce barriers to students voting? And then the
Yes.
second piece is how can institutions provide support, whether it be information or things like that. That's kind of what I hear. I would love to hear more about the barriers that you see. Are there barriers that you're seeing commonly amongst your member institutions that are in the way of students voting? You mentioned a bit about attendance requirements, things like that. But can you provide some specific examples that can be reduced?
Sure. First of all, thank you for that question. Regarding the attendance barriers, so I know for my school in particular, that we do not have the flexibility if voting typically happens within a regular week within between our class schedule. So we don't necessarily have the opportunity to just go out and miss a class without receiving a penalty for attendance. So we were trying to encourage higher education institutions to remove this barrier or work around that in their curriculum to ensure that there is capacity for students. If they need to go off campus to vote, they can do so. In addition to that, I will kind of tie that back into the resources as well. I will say, as an out-of-state student myself, I'm from New Jersey. Coming to Maryland and hearing about the electoral process is definitely a lot different from New Jersey, as you can imagine. So trying to just provide general education in that regard has been a really important initiative, I will say, for us. And for the most part, we're just trying to ensure that students have the access that they need as much as possible. We also, for example, we also included transportation in there. That was another really big thing too, where students may not have the means to get to polling booths off campus. So there's a variety of accessibility issues, whether that be academic, whether that be trying to actually get to the place to provide a vote, or anything in between that. Does that sort of answer the question?
Sure, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Burnham?
Yes, I'd like to follow up Commissioner Agu's question. That first recommendation, I don't have it up before me now, but there was something about lack of advising or counseling or something. Can you talk more about what was intended there?
Sure. So in the spring 2025 section in particular, we were encouraging higher education institutions to establish some sort of voting and civic engagement task force on their campus. Loyola in particular, we have certain student groups that are passionate about this and that have taken this initiative, but there hasn't been much of faculty or staff on certain campuses providing support in that regard. So we were trying to make it more of a unified effort between higher education institutions to ensure that those with a bit more of a platform, or those that have more information regarding the voting and civic engagement process, are contributing to that in some capacity. And like I said, there are already students that are taking this on, but having the support of the administration, faculty, or staff is really integral in that regard. So that was our main idea behind that language.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dukes and then Commissioner Serrano.
Thank you. And thank you to Ms. Faison for being here and representing the council. I have a few questions. The first is, has this recommendation at all been discussed at the various college campuses with college leadership across the institutions prior to bringing it to the commission?
So to answer your first question, each council member has taken it upon themselves to consult. A lot of them are student government presidents, so they have taken the ability of their position to consult their own, not constituents, but their own leaders within their organization. So they have taken it to other students. In regards to faculty and administrators, I know a handful have. I can't speak for every single council member, but I know they have received some sort of insight or guidance on what their higher education has participated in. I know for me personally, I speak to my college president on a weekly basis, so I was able to speak to him about this and kind of get his insight on it, considering he's been a part of the administration for over 20 years. So to simply answer your question, yes, and that did help guide some of the language that we included within this recommendation letter.
Okay, my second question, and this may be a broader question, but it is, has there been any thought to institutions becoming locations of polling places? and what kind of dialogue might have occurred with the, the local election offices that helped to determine that.
Yes, so that was actually a huge talking point within our meetings, and we are hoping that within this recommendation, there is some sort of integration of voter booths on campus, because we also know that would also help with the accessibility component of transportation. So yes, that was discussed.
Okay, and my last one is, are the recommendations focused on early election leading up to the general election day, or is it only about that general election day?
So this was actually another big component of our conversations as well. We wanted this to expand outside of election day, because we didn't want this just to be like a singular day for students to just get the day off and then go vote, and that was it. So within the recommendation, there's also an ongoing section of what can be done throughout to prepare for an upcoming election day. But also this recommendation in itself, even though we have like a chronological timeline presentation, it spans beyond that, and it goes throughout. It can be weeks or months in preparation. And we included that within the language of the conclusion, just acknowledging that there are different organizational structures and scheduling processes on campus in regard to implementing these recommendations and these initiatives. So we're expanding beyond election day. We didn't want it to just be restricted to one sole day. And we wanted to make sure that there was intentionality behind the process leading up to it.
So, and if I could, this is my last comment, just to make sure that I was clear, is are you asking for some relief relative to class attendance and support during early voting and election day? Or is it about the whole process of voter education that you want some relief from, the class attendance requirements that are there? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes, sorry if I didn't answer the question. I would say relief around the whole voter education process, but there is an emphasis around the actual day in itself and having flexibility with class attendance.
Thank you.
Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, I guess my question is regarding like collaboration with the State Board of Elections, and to what extent did you engage with them? To what extent have you met with them and presented these findings to the state? Because it sounds a lot like a lot of this work kind of falls under their purview. They do outreach to elderly communities, prison communities. So student communities seems to be falling within that kind of that area. And so have you talked to them? What have they said?
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question, have we reached out to the City Board of Elections regarding any initiatives that may align with our own?
I guess the State Board of Elections or the County Board. I mean, I'm assuming the State Board of Elections oversees all of the kind of the outreach to different communities, but usually falls within the purview of like the County Board of Elections. But like, how much of the boards, either county or State Board of Elections, have you engaged with?
Sure, I will defer to Emily. Emily, if you have any insight, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So because this is a council that is intended to advise the commission, the thought was to bring this recommendation to the commission first, so that it is on public record. It makes its way into this venue, and then decide what next. So the next step could be that we work closely with election offices to do a better coordinated outreach with our campuses. It may be working with local government to do coordinated outreach. So that is definitely on the table. It is not something that was immediately discussed, because the intent was to first bring it to the commission, advise the commission on these recommendations, and then consider where to go from here. As some of you may know, this has been a recommendation that has come up in past election cycles from the Student Advisory Council, and the commission has worked with campus presidents, sending a notification saying, hey, this would be great to do what you can to support students in participating in the election process. But certainly, Commissioner Serrano, if you're making a recommendation or request that we also coordinate with election offices, that is absolutely reasonable and something that we can do moving forward.
I guess my broader kind of arguments is, again, it's the issue of scope and kind of mission creep, or how much, like, we have a lot to ask of universities and colleges and administrators to file certain reports, to follow up on, DEI requests or whatever, like financial aid. And I think those issues are I understand this is a critical component as well, but like, where do we draw the line? Where do we say elections today, maybe tomorrow's vaccines, maybe the next day something else? Where do we start saying our focus is strictly education and that's all we can do?
Well, I see Commissioner Agu has a question. So we can have a conversation about the Commissioner Agu, but let me first cede the floor to Commissioner Agu.
I actually was going to address the substance of. I was going to probably get into the bigger discussion.
Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good question. I think my view is, I'm not a fan of slippery slope arguments. It can kind of keep you from dealing with the issue at hand. That's my personal view. I think Ms. Faison, who she kind of, if I look at the recommendations, there are two parts of them. One is reducing barriers, which I think, bluntly, I think is not as big a lift or an ask of an institution. The attendance one is different per institution, but I think reducing some barriers, I think, is easier. The question, which I did not ask, but I take from the recommendations, that there's also a ton of organizations, civically, like a state board of elections, like a number of nonprofit organizations, that I think we would not want institutions to stand in the way of, who can be involved on campuses and do, whether I think about in Prince George's County, I think about some of the work that CASA does with immigrant communities around a lot of the same, not to necessarily put them on a pedestal, but they are a type of organization that does that, as well as a number of political parties. So I think, if it were me, I think talking about how we reduce barriers and increase collaboration with folks who are working within this space, I think is within the scope, and I don't think it's an undue burden. I think that the question in tight budget times becomes, are we asking institutions to allocate resources? That I think is an institution by institution choice. That's my take on this, and a long answer to I think your broader question, Commissioner. But I would say I think asking institutions to reduce barriers and do collaborations with folks who are already doing this work, I don't think it's an undue burden. But I'm happy to yield to my other commissioners who may have different thoughts.
Commissioner Robinson, and then Warmack, and then Dr. Dukes.
Hi. Thank you all, and thank you, Alexis Faison. I'm sorry I missed your meeting last week. I've been presenting research. My apologies again. I was just going to say, with the lack of resources for particular organizations, like that could be a research option, because when you do reach out to these other organizations to assist with what you're presenting, there could be that phase of, are they available to accommodate students as well as what they're taking on? So that could also be a barrier when you look at that. So that's something also, even though we're bringing it to them, those could be some questions that you ask when you talk to them, because I know that with limited resources when it comes to getting people to the polls and things of that sort, that also becomes a barrier. And then where do students fit in when they're already faced with those challenges?
Thanks, Commissioner Robinson.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Faison, for coming forward. I'm very, very excited about this topic, and I'm an advocate and support the students' request. But there are many, many organizations. I would also agree with my colleagues and my commissioners that there are many organizations trying to get to students in Maryland as a state to help students in their voter registration and their voter education, their voter awareness efforts. And so I would just ask maybe that the commissioners think about who our institutions could partner with. I know some institutions already partner with many, many organizations. And I know we haven't heard from our institutions about this and what they're doing. So that might be something that I would suggest we do, is can we hear from our institutions to find out what they are exactly doing, what they're able to do at this point in time. I know I'm working on 2 I'm in two organizations who are working to get to students to help them in their voter awareness. And I'm going on campuses trying to help them to get to students. So I think we also need to hear what they're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Wormack. Dr. Dukes?
So I won't echo Commissioner Womack's comments, but I do agree that there's a plethora of opportunity and actually work going on college campuses and have been for some time. So this is not new. Dr. Dow will recall when we were required to put registration information up on our website so students could go in and easily register to vote. And there are always partner organizations and including student organizations that are having voter registration drives, voter education. The only thing that I would suggest is that, maybe laying out from the Student Advisory Council what they see as the responsibility of institutions in terms of support and what you see as the responsibility of students. I don't know how appropriate it is to ask faculty to reduce barriers to education in terms of the majors or programs of study you're pursuing if students are unwilling to deal with voter education kind of processes out on their own time, so to speak. So where is there a nexus with regard to all of that? I also think we have to take into account that there are many institutions that don't have the kind of transportation opportunities that you spoke about in the recommendation. So for me, I agree. It might be helpful to poll institutions to see what they're currently doing and how they're currently reducing barriers. And that might help us to understand what kind of recommendations we might want to send forward, even though I will say to you that I wholeheartedly believe in voter education, voter registration, and I understand the issue that the students have brought forward, but where do we see the opportunity for collaboration and a nexus around the work?
Thank you, Commissioner Dukes. Commissioner Burnham?
Thank you. I'd just like to register my concern along with what I understood Commissioner Serrano to say. Even asking institutions to submit a report on what they're currently doing is burdensome. Perhaps one way for us to support these recommendations is to look at them carefully, and if we think that we can, as a commission, merit sending them forward and just recommend that the institutions do what they can, given their resources, etc., that might be sufficient support for us. Generally supporting the notion of civic participation and leadership, but at the same time not moving so far beyond our focused effort to coordinate higher education in the state.
I am, but I can still say hello.
Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Any other discussion from the commission? So what I'm hearing from, Dr. Dow, did you want to speak?
No. I was waiting to hear our next steps, and so anxious to have that dialogue. So please go ahead. Thank you.
So what I was just saying, what I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners, and I agree, is a very great appreciation for the work of Chair Faison and her council, and an agreement that what the recommendations are extremely important. At the same time, we don't want to add to the workload of already burdened institutions in terms of extra reporting requirements, and we don't want to duplicate efforts of groups that are already doing this work, whether it's other parts of the government, be it the Board of Elections or other nonprofits or other on-campus groups. What the commissioners, what I'm hearing from my fellow commissioners is that maybe Chair Faison, we ask you to go back to your council and to do some research about what other groups are doing already in an effort to be collaborative and maybe come back to us at our January meeting. I believe we're meeting on January 24th with more details about how your council can join up with what other groups, including elections, are already doing. The way I read the 2-page memo that are your recommendations, these are non-binding recommendations, and I'm not sure that there are any strenuous reporting requirements. I think it's sort of a list of best practices. So maybe if you bring back that list of best practices with us at our next meeting and you flesh out a bit how campuses could work with the Board of Elections and work with other nonprofits, we would feel more comfortable about endorsing those recommendations going forward. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, good morning again. Chair Motz, just as I guess a friendly thought, can we push back their reporting back to us to perhaps February, given the breaks that are coming up?
Yeah, that's very good and very
Okay.
student focused. Yes, you're absolutely right. Students are going to be on break.
Yes.
So yes, I think that makes a lot more sense to our February meeting.
Yes, if possible. Thank you.
That's February 28th, the fourth Wednesday of February. Any reaction?
One, just not reaction, but maybe, and this might be this bit adds to the work, but I think it might make us more actionable. I think to the extent, Chair, I'm looking at you, Chair Faison, even though you cannot tell me, but I'm looking at you. To the extent that in your research you can uplift partners, specific organizations that particular organizations can work with. A bunch of institutions are geolocated, meaning that they're in the same region and can rely on some of the same partners. The one downside of pushing back the report, this kind of research phase, is that as we get closer to a primary and also to an election, this does eat up into some. So I'm trying to be sensitive to that. So the other thing that I think that I would ask is I do think I think we as a commission can commit to kind of acting once we kind of get this information, and I think we'd ask the Student Advisory Council to come back with as much actionable information as possible. And I think particularly on the partners that institutions can actually work with, so that ideally in February we can forward that information on, and so that institutions can act. Because I do want to recognize that, because that does eat up about 2 months of time that I know you and your council and your folks that you're working with would like to use for voter education and that. So I think more actionable that this research can be, I think we as a commission can respond equally swiftly given the shortened time frame.
Any comments from any other Commissioner Serrano?
Yeah, could I just suggest, I would also speak to the State Board of Elections. I think that this should be a priority for them. If they're reaching out to different communities, elderly, prison populations, whatever the group is, they're trying to reach out and try to expand participation in elections. I think they should be reaching out to students. They should be having some guidelines of what part of organizations, how to engage folks, how to do civic education. Like, this should be something that they should be doing.
Commissioner Howe?
Yes, I want to make certain that we are commending the work that the Student Council has done. It's an inordinate amount of work that they have put forth and to describe to us. So I don't want them to be discouraged by all of the comments and questions that we've had today. I look forward when they come back to us with further information and for us to endorse the work that they are suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Howe. And I completely agree and was hoping to end on that very positive note. Commissioner Chair Faison, I hope that you take back to your council that the commission is very interested in your work and appreciates your volunteer work. You're working on Saturdays to get this done. And the reason we have so many questions is because we want your good recommendations to be executed upon and actionable, and don't want you to be duplicating what other folks are already doing. So I agree with Commissioner Serrano, the head of the State Board of Elections, Jared Demarinis. Please reach out to him. I think Emily can connect you. If not, I certainly can, or Secretary Rye can. I imagine they're already doing a lot of student outreach and that they will be extremely happy to hear from your council because you are boots on the ground on the college campuses. And so I think this isn't just a homework assignment. This is really, when you come back to us in a couple months, in late February, I think your plan will be ready to execute and ready for this commission to give its endorsement. So thank you to you and all of the council for your work. Anything else on this topic? Chair Faison, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I just wanted to thank all the commissioners for your feedback. We really appreciate it. This was our first recommendation letter of the year, just as a preface. So we're still kind of getting our things settled out, but nonetheless, I'm very grateful for all of your feedback, and I've been taking copious notes. So I'm looking forward to coming back and proposing this again. And if there's anything in the meantime that you would all like to pass along, I'll put my email in the chat just as a follow-up. But again, thank you all for making time for this discussion and looking forward to presenting again.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you for your work. All right. Speaking of being student focused, our next topic relates to changes in the FAFSA. And as everyone knows, the federal government has made changes to the FAFSA to try to simplify the process. It has ramifications for us here in Maryland. And presenting to us will be Jeff Newman, and Mr. Jeff Newman and Mr. Al Dorsett from the Department of Finance Administration, specifically the Office of Student Financial Assistance, who will explain the FAFSA changes to us, explain the ramifications for us here in Maryland, and then ask for our endorsement of a recommendation that they are making. So I turn it over to Mr. Newman and Mr. Dorsett.
Thank you very much. I, too, am going to turn it over to Mr. Dorsett, who will go into the details of all the changes. And Al?
Thank you, Mr. Newman. I'm going to make sure everybody can still hear me. Good morning, Dr. Rod. Good morning, Chair Mott, as well as good morning, commissioners. Hopefully everybody can see my slide that I'm sharing now. So just big one, free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. The deadline date is changing because of the many changes that they're doing with the FAFSA. The deadline date has changed, at least for this year, from October 1st, or at least the opening date from October 1st to December 2023. They have not given a definite date, which I'll go into more information on that. But it is definitely changing a lot in just looking at us being prepared to service our students. So a little bit of history about the FAFSA. In 1986, the HEA reauthorized, established the congressional methodology for all Title IV programs, which were the federal programs. They developed at that time what we called the EFC, Expected Family Contributions, which calculates the amount that students' families can contribute, the minimum amount they can contribute to their college education to make them or determine the eligibility for any federal aid that they receive. In 1992, the reauthorization created the free application for federal student aid, which replaced the common financial aid form from 1986. The FAFSA became the main and only federal form for students to apply for federal financial aid. In 2006, the Commission on the Future of Higher Education proposed a number of recommendations for higher education, FAFSA simplification being one of them. So it has been going on from 2006 up until now, and most likely will continue to go on. In 2015, an executive action allowed the use of prior tax year information on the FAFSA. So previously, students had to enter tax information from their prior year's tax filing information. That meant that if they wanted to apply for the FAFSA, which first came available then in January, they had to estimate and import financial aid information such as income and assets, and then later update that information once they actually filed their return. The executive action allowed the use of tax information from 2 prior years. So if a student was attending, for this example, when it came available in 17-18, they used the 2015 tax year. This also established allowing them to change the opening date of the FAFSA to October 1st, which many of us are used to at this point in time. So passed on December 2020 as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, 2021 represents a significant overhaul in the process and systems used to award federal student aid starting this upcoming 24-25 academic year. The FAFSA Simplification Act expands access to federal student aid and introduces significant changes to the FAFSA process, including changes to the FAFSA form, how students and families will complete it, and the eligibility calculation. The Future Act enhances the FAFSA stance by allowing the U.S. Department of Education to automatically obtain information from the IRS for student parents and other contributors, such as spouse or step-parents, who provide consistent approval. So the major changes with the Simplification Act replaces the expected family contribution with the Student Aid Index, FAI. Federal methodology for student aid eligibility determination is changed. Modifications to family definitions in FAFSA formulas change. Each student and contributor must create their own studentaid.gov account. So parents are now called contributors, spouses are now called contributors. If a contributor does not have a social security number, they can still fill out the FAFSA. This will not be available until the FAFSA opens in December. The federal government has promised that the FAFSA will open by December 31st, but has not given a date. So for those individuals that do not have a social security number, they will be able to create a what we call FSA ID or studentaid.gov's username and password, but they will not be able to start creating that ID until the FAFSA becomes available, which will in many ways prolong how fast a student can actually complete the FAFSA, because in this process now, the student will complete the FAFSA first. Once they complete the FAFSA and identify their contributors, an email will go over to the actual contributor for them to fill in the information. If that contributor does not have an FSA ID at that point in time, they will still need to complete one first before they can put in their information. The point of the contributors is them providing consent and approval to disclose personal identifiable information, as well as to obtain your federal tax information directly from the IRS. So every individual has to be authorized, which is part of that FSA ID password and username and password. So on November 15, 2023, the U.S. Department of Education announced the approved FAFSA form will be available for students and parents by December 1st, 2023. They also announced schools and state agencies will begin receiving aid eligibility information, including what we call ISER, Institutional Student Information Records, by the end of January 2024, with information on paper forms to follow. Students will be able to make corrections and updates by the end of January 2024, and institutions will be able to make corrections in the following week. Direct connections to certain state financial aid applications and the ability for unpaid preparers to complete the FAFSA form on behalf of students will not return until the 2025 academic year. So, Maryland FAFSA deadline. MD Code Regs 13B081003, subsection 13B081003A2 establishes a deadline date of March 1st to be considered eligible for financial assistance under the Educational Excellence Award Program. Statute does not identify a specific date as a requirement, but statute basically points to the guidelines of regulation. It is recommended that for FY24, we push back the FAFSA deadline to June 1st, 2024 for the 2024-25 academic year.
Mr. Dorsett, I think we have a question from Commissioner Serrano.
Yeah, just a question, just clarification. So I was going to call it MISFA. It's like the Maryland kind of financial aid form. Does that information kind of import information from FAFSA? And if so, then so I'm thinking like DACA students, like they're not eligible for federal aid, but they might be eligible for college or state aid. Would a student have to fill out the FAFSA and then that information gets transferred over to MISFA, or should they just go straight to the Maryland Student Financial Aid form?
So the student goes straight to the Maryland Student Financial Aid form. However, what we do is we use the federal government formula for calculating before the EFC, now the SAI. So we needed to hold back MISFA until we made sure that the federal government had basically finalized their calculation. So we plan on opening up the MISFA in December, which we're working on finalizing now. So it will be available at the same time that the FAFSA will be available.
So DACA students should fill out the FAFSA, and then that information will be.
No, they fill out the MISFA calculates the same way as the FAFSA, but it's a separate form that undocumented students complete. So they don't have to worry about the FAFSA because they wouldn't be eligible for federal student aid, which is why we have MISFA. We just have to make sure that MISFA has the same correlation of how it calculates the formula to calculate an SAI. So that's why it will be available at the same time as the FAFSA, but they will not need to complete the FAFSA. They will still complete that MISFA.
Okay. All right,
So it's MISFA instead of FAFSA. You never fill out both. It's confusing. Commissioner Warmack.
I just had a question. Thank you, Mr. Dorsett, for the information. So you're suggesting that the commission push back the due date for the FAFSA because it's a regulation in MHAC? I just want to make sure I'm clear. It's the MHAC regulation, and we know that given the timeliness of when the new form comes out and the due dates, that's going to impact our students, correct? And their ability to, okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on what I'm reading. Thank you.
And just to add to that, Commissioner Warmack, what I'm told by our Assistant Attorneys General is that actually the agency, not us 11 commissioners, but the staff at the agency has the authority to push back the regulation on its own in the best interest of students, to push back the date in the regulation. But that just because it is such a sea change, the agency wisely wanted to bring it to us and make sure that it passed muster with us as well. So technically, the commission doesn't even need to vote on it. Commissioner Agu.
No, and I won't hide the ball. I very much endorse the recommendation and won't move here. My one question is less on this, but more about the interim time. You know, this reminds me of Obamacare signups years ago and so on and so forth. So I'd love to hear from you, Mr. Dorsett, and also Chair Motz, who's also an expert here on just the public awareness push, partnership with organizations. But if we're going to give this time, how do we make sure that we use it well? Because my gut is a lot of students are already not aware, let alone now with these changes. So I'm curious what that public push looks like, and what might you recommend that we as a commission or a broader agency get behind so we make sure that we make the most use of this time, assuming we endorse the recommendation, which I hope that we do.
It's a great question. Mr. Dorsett, I'll turn it over to you, and then I'm happy to add my thoughts.
Okay, so definitely we've been doing a statewide approach, working with the Maryland State Department of Education. We've done so far, I believe, 5 different FAFSA presentations, train-the-trainer presentations, where we've worked with MSDE to get high school counselors, other representatives to attend, going over the new FAFSA changes, giving them a sample of what the FAFSA looks like. The federal government definitely had provided a FAFSA kind of form for individuals to use. So we've shown them that and provided them that resource, pushing for students and families that can to make sure that they create their FSA ID. So when the FAFSA does become available, that it will be available. We have one more, I believe, presentation this coming Friday at, I believe, ECBC. And then we are looking at developing a virtual presentation that will work with MSDE to invite more individuals too. So that's the piece of just getting that out there. We know that institutions on their websites have indicated to individuals that the FAFSA will be available by December 31st and pushing there. The next piece after is really working with MSDE to get more individuals to do the FAFSA and providing them with materials to provide the individuals, as well as looking at what possible partnerships we could do with different institutions or other things that we can do within MHEC to publicize that information and get more individuals to complete the FAFSA as soon as possible. I'll turn it over to you, Chair Mott.
Sure. And I would, just to add, I agree with everything Mr. Dorsett said. I would add that, just a reminder, what we're talking about, this March 1st deadline is well known in the student world. And just to be clear, it's a deadline to apply for Maryland aid through your FAFSA. The FAFSA you can apply for anytime. So just so everyone's clear on that, but it usually is the case that if you want to get Maryland aid, you need to fill out your FAFSA by March 1st. But the recommendation is here, because the feds have been slow to roll out this new FAFSA. Usually it's rolled out October 1st. This year it's going to be December 31st. So a full 3 months later. This is a recommendation for a one-time postponement of the Maryland state deadline of March 1st to June 1st. And in terms of outreach, I know that MHEC just hired at least one new outreach specialist. I think that we should leverage all of our assets, all of the hundreds of folks who participated in the town hall on November 10th. We have all of their contact information. I think we should use the press. I think the governor's office has been engaged, and we should use that resource, because it really is something that we're doing to be very student focused. And at the same time, I think the message should be students should be encouraged to fill out their FAFSA as soon as possible, because those who have been in the administration of this know it's just going to it's going to push the calendar later in terms of students knowing what their financial aid package is, therefore being able to compare financial aid offers and college acceptances as between various institutions. So it's going to be a bit of a mess this year. That's not a mess of our causing. And we're trying to do the best by students. But I think it should be sort of a two-pronged message that you have until June 1st, but you should still try to do it as soon as possible so that you can get information as soon as possible from MHEC, because MHEC is still going to be processing these, if I'm right, Mr. Dorsett, on a rolling basis. So you'll be open for business. You're just giving students a little more extra time if they need it. Is that correct?
That is correct. So as legislation has identified, the first initial awards will go out by April 15th. With the recent changes in legislation, we don't expect that there'll be too many hiccups now that individuals will not be required to submit their high school transcripts. We are looking at reducing the number of students selected for verification down. So amount of students selected for verification. So we are looking at that April 15th will be our initial point of awards. And then from there, we'll have rolling awards on a weekly basis as we get more FAFSAs. The system calculates eligibility, and then we start moving forward and keep awarding individuals.
Just a quick let's follow here, but more I agree with everything that has been said. My only caveat, but I would say maybe recommendation is, I think as many non-institutional partners as we can include in this process, the better. We know there are many organizations who are working with our youth on a regular basis, everything from nonprofits to churches and things like that. And I also will offer myself as tribute to be any help that I can be to this effort. So I'm happy to talk offline with you, Mr. Dorsett. But no, thank you so much. And thank you for all this great work.
I think we have two questions from commissioners. First, Commissioner Thompson, and then Commissioner Dukes.
Thank you for the great information, Mr. Dorsett. And I think the most recent discussion, the Chair Motz, that really helped clarify some things. There was a point on the last slide before this one. I want to make sure that, okay, direct connections to certain state financial aid applications. That one, the very last one, will return with the 2025-26 FAFSA. How would that impact exactly what you were talking about on the slide for the MISPA?
So luckily that does not impact them. There's about 6 states that actually have where they import the individual's FAFSA to update their information. So really where the student clicks on the link once they've completed the FAFSA, goes directly to that agency's website and completes a supplemental form that goes in with the FAFSA documentation to calculate the student's eligibility for aid within those states. Because we don't have that type of connection, that does not impact us.
Thank you very much.
Good question. Commissioner Dukes?
I think my comment was going to be in line with Commissioner Aguz, and that was really about how we're thinking about communication to what we would consider to be non-traditional ways in which individuals really find out about college, financial aid, and the like. And the other piece is adult learners. You know, much of what I've heard seems to focus on, you know, that population that we know we can reach through our public and non-public schools, maybe through the something on a institution's financial aid page or the like. But I think about, is this important enough for the commission to really think about what are the other kinds of things that you might be doing and might have some sort of opportunity for nonprofit organizations that really deal with students or potential students a lot, given the services that they provide across the state of Maryland. So I think, you know, Chair Mott's organizations like yours or Joe Fisher's in Prince George's County, you're really tied in. There are many others that support students that are not. I think about the Divine Nine and all of the work that they do around helping students as they think about their you know, potential beyond high school, or even adult learners who are coming back into the educational arena. So again, it was really just an affirmation of what we've already heard from Commissioner Agoo. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Dukes. And I completely agree. You mentioned Joe Fisher, our wonderful colleague in Prince George's County. He leads a statewide alliance of organizations like his organization and mine, First Generation College Bound in Baltimore. And so the word will be certainly spread to those groups. They were very strong participants in our financial aid town hall, our virtual town hall on November 10th. I think the goal is, and I know Mr. Coley and Ms. Wardlaw and the communications team at MPAC have a communications strategy and plan and are ready to execute it. I think they were waiting for this meeting, but I'm hoping, and perhaps Mr. Coley and Ms. Wardlaw, you can share your strategy with the commission after this meeting. But the goal is to really spread the word far and wide to the nonprofits, to the churches, to all of the institutions, including the Divine Nine, the fraternities and sororities, but really everyone who we can think of who's reaching students, as well as the press. And that doesn't just include newspapers, that's radio. Really just trying to get the word out and leveraging the power of the governor's office as well. So there is a plan in place, and I think that it's just another example of this agency really trying to have students' best interests at heart. And as you say, Dr. Dukes, not just the traditional student who's a high school senior, but the adult learners who are going back to school later after they've graduated from high school. I think that I am proud of the work of this agency in really being student focused and thinking ahead and recognizing that that postponing this deadline will help the students of Maryland. So with that, if there are no other comments or questions from the commissioners, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Dorsett, for providing some simplicity among a lot of complexity. I think it's really important for us and for so many stakeholders. I wonder if you have any insight into what will be the consumer experience in the new FAFSA application process. Presumably with the simplification, it will be easier to use. Is there any estimation on metrics in terms of, will it be faster to apply? Will it be less time consuming? What is like the consumer experience for both the student and the adult in the application process? Do you have any insight that you're sharing with stakeholders?
So unfortunately, the federal government doesn't truly have any insight yet. The reason why that they indicated that they identified that the FAFSA will be open by December 31st is they identified that they may open up the FAFSA earlier than December 31st. And then they may have 2 weeks of it open and see that people are experiencing problems and close it down and then open it back up. Really, unfortunately, this is their beta test time where these individuals are going to be really their sample of how it really is. From us looking at the prototype seems very simple. And I could even share that with you if you give me 1 minute.
And while Mr. Dorset is pulling that up, I would just add that the U.S. Department of Education, which oversees FAFSA, has been proactive in having trainings for users like Mr. Dorset and his team, like nonprofits where I work. And the goal is to simplify it. There are fewer questions. They do, instead of using this IRS tax retrieval tool that was somewhat bulky, you now check a box where you allow the federal government on the back end behind the scenes to coordinate with the IRS to get tax records. So the goal is a lofty one. I think there are some concerns among organizations like mine that work with with parents who are not as comfortable using technology, or in fact, their parents may not be have access. I think that the parents play a larger role in this new FAFSA. And for those who don't have parents who are ready and able to jump in and log on and create an ID, I think it is going to create an extra burden for those families.
So the prototype, basically, it's not where you can maneuver everywhere around. It's basically specific. But they do give examples where individual can choose if they're the student, individual can choose if they're the parent, if the application is in process. So with the prototype, we have the individual where the individual has already created their FSA ID and their password. The individual logs in. It takes the individual through certain scenarios that they can watch different videos to help them and provide that support services. So this is what the actual FAFSA page would look like, even though this is a prototype. They have some videos of kind of the FAFSA overview. When the individual goes to start a new form, it asks the individual if they're the student or the parent. The individual would indicate that they're the student, let's say first, gives them a video of the FAFSA overview that the individual can watch or they can continue. Additionally, it talks about understanding what a contributor is, then what to expect. So they're looking at that it will take about an hour for each individual to be able to do it. When I've gone through it, I didn't see that it took an actual hour. But again, this is a prototype, so this isn't showing every key intricate piece of it. Tells them what's going to happen after January 2004. Your form will be processed within 3 days. You'll receive a FAFSA submission summary. Schools will use your SAI to calculate how much aid you're eligible to receive, and then it goes into start the effort. So, I mean, the effort that they put into making this ready and prepared has been extremely detailed. So as they go into it, they just ask that the individual identify their state. For their sample, this individual was from New York. I could put 10/2001 in here. And then it tells them what to get ready and goes over kind of everything that they're authorizing, your education. Here's the consent information down here. Student all goes all the way down, have some additional questions that they may ask, or usual questions, so that the student can see. And then this is where the individual is actually approving their consent. So then it goes into different areas of if the individual's personal circumstances. If they're single, what year they're in college, I'll put no, that I won't have my first bachelor's degree by 24-25. And some personal circumstances. So these are a lot of the independent questions that a student will be asked. I'm going to say no, none of these apply to me. It'll ask if there's any other circumstances. Am I accompanied, unaccompanied youth, homeless? And then this is the last unusual circumstance. It'll ask if I'm experiencing any unusual circumstances. That will then define if an individual is dependent or independent. Now, we know that there are cases that the federal government realized a few years ago in which, unfortunately, there were dependent students that their parents would not provide them with their information. In those cases, they ask if the individual has that situation, they can have unsubsidized loans only, which hopefully we don't have too many students experience that situation. Then it'll ask stuff about the parents. Are your parents married to each other? If I indicate yes, it'll say both parents are supposed to be on the FAFSA. So if I indicate no, it'll ask, are your parents living together? If I indicate yes, it'll say both parents need to be on the FAFSA. So if I indicate no, it'll ask me, did one parent provide more? So this is how they define or start looking at which parent, if you don't live with both of your parents, which parent is providing the most support for you to define which parent will actually go on the FAFSA. So even when talking with individuals, and the federal government has said it, we in schools are not the ones to so specifically get detailed in there to say, well, your dad made 42,000, your mom made 40,000, that should be the individual that you're providing. If the individual says that no, mom is the one that takes care of me, it doesn't matter what dad's income is, that's what the student said. Unless there's any conflicting information that comes away, then the school accepts that and they keep moving forward with that information. So here, if we say yes, then they'll ask, did the parent you identify get remarried? So if the individual says yes, then now that spouse, that stepfather or stepmother, becomes a contributor. If that individual says no, then of course that one parent that they already identified is a contributor. So then this is where the student provides the information for the parent. They provide this information for the parent, and that parent gets sent an invite to the email that the student puts. The parent then opens up that email, signs in with their FSA ID and password, and that parent does their part on there. So once that parent does their part, then the student is done and complete. So the student is not done and complete, even though they've done their part, until the parent does their part. Unfortunately, there's no way of identifying what students are in the middle. And we asked the federal government about that, but there is no way. 60 days, either 45 or 60 days, the parent has to complete their section. If they don't complete their section, then the student has to send them another invite. So these are the things that we're really looking at, that yes, for your parent and student that are connected with each other, communicate with each other a lot, it'll be probably a very efficient process for them, especially for a parent that has two students going to school, because once a parent identifies who they are and authenticates themselves and gives that authorization, if their second student does the FAFSA after and puts that same parent, that information is going to immediately go for there because that parent already identified and gave that authority. This is the only year that students and parents will have to do everything over again, where the FAFSA was pre-populated before. After this year, they're expecting that all information will be pre-populated again, and the only thing that the parents will have to do is give that authority real quick and then move forward from there.
But as you point out, Mr. Dorsett, if the parent doesn't respond to the email, that creates problems for the student. And so that organizations like ours are trying to figure out how to help with that.
Correct. Especially when there's also a step parent involved, because then we have two individuals. So one parent do it, but if the step parent doesn't do it or forgets to do it, then they still have to finish off that process there. So that's where it can be complicated. That's why we're looking for the extension of that time frame to give individuals more time.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Commissioner Howe, I think, had a question. I think you're on mute. think you're still on mute. There you go.
I know, I'm getting it.
Okay.
So if I were a student who wanted to engage in this process, I would be so overwhelmed by everything that I have to do. So I guess my first question is there a person to whom a student can go to have an individual conversation about how to jump through all these hoops?
The school counselors across the state and the K-12 system help with that, aided by nonprofits like First Generation College Bound, led by Joe Fisher in Prince George's County, College Bound Foundation in Baltimore City, where I work. So there also are at community-based organizations like the Y or the library. They do Saturday FAFSA help sessions. So there is a community-wide effort, and there has been for a long time, because the FAFSA has always been hard. In fact, this is trying to make it easier. But you're absolutely right, Commissioner Howe. It is daunting.
Okay, so when the parents are asked to supply information, there is an assumption that there's an email connected with each of those two parents. Suppose, for example, dad is in prison and he doesn't have an email. So that's just going to go nowhere when they ask for his information, correct?
Yes, there is a situation.
Those are the instances where you look at the aspect of if dad is in prison, even though dad is a parent, dad is not considered to be a contributor. That's why they've identified and separated contributors now compared to parents. So even though dad is a parent, because dad is in prison, dad would not be identified as a contributor. So dad would not need to get an email or provide their information.
Okay.
But the student would be required to show proof that dad was in prison. So it is absolutely the case, and I understand why for policy reasons, because there's a lot of money at stake, but the students who have the most limited resources are the ones who have to jump through the most bureaucratic hoops. That is the way we have set up our government in this country for financial aid.
Right. I understand. So the last question I have, and I'll be quick. If mom has custody of the child and father is paying child support, or there is a child support arrearage, I had one the other day with $33,000 owed by father for child support, how does that factor into the application?
It's all based off how the student reports it. And that's what we've conveyed as we've done our trainings. We've given those scenarios. Basically, it's really who the student identifies that provides the support for them, and that's the information is requested. Now, if child support is on mom's taxes, as the IRS imports the taxes into the FAFSA, then
you don't report child support on your income tax. It's never there.
Correct. So with that being said, then if the child support is not reported, then there will be no questions about the child support. However, if mom reported on the FAFSA child support, then that would come into the calculation.
Okay. Because the child support is supposed to be for the benefit of the child, not the parent. Anyway, I think that gets very complicated. Thank you very much.
It is very complicated. You're absolutely right. And this is, there are thousands of professionals across the state every year trying to grapple with the FAFSA, and it's only more complicated this year because it's new. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like. So I really applaud the agency for getting out there and doing the training and the outreach and being proactive. I think it is going to be a messy year. And I think Maryland, led by Dr. Rye and Mr. Dorsett, we're doing the best that we can to be proactive and ahead of this. Any other questions on this topic? All right, then, even though we don't legally need it, as our assistant attorneys general have told us, I would ask for a motion from the commission to move the date for the Maryland deadline for the FAFSA from March 1st to June 1st of this year for a one-time only extension to June 1st, 2023. Oh, Dr. Wormack and Dr. Dukes.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Wormack.
I wanted to move approval.
Excellent.
Unless
Dr. Dukes
somebody else has a question.
Dr. Dukes, did you have a question? I think you're on mute.
Yes, I do. And the question is because you indicated it has the potential to be a messy year.
Yes.
And my question is, if Mr. Dorsett, the team, Dr. Rye, find that it's a little messier than they thought it would be, would they have in a motion the ability to extend the deadline date if at all possible?
I think legally they would. Ms.
Well,
Ward
because
or
we're voting, you know, and you've already told me that they have the ability, the authority to do it. If
Yes.
we're voting, do we also want to give them some latitude if they have to make some different decisions? That's the only question I have.
Understood.
Okay.
I think
Chair Mott, I appreciate Commissioner Duke's observation there. First of all, this is a messy year. I want to thank all my colleagues, Al Dorsett and his team, for being proactive and trying to understand what changes will be and how students will react to it. There's a lot of uncertainties there. So certainly we are not preponing the date, we are postponing it, giving students more time, giving them more removing more barriers for them. And more latitude will be better. So if we say 1st June, or some flexibility in moving it further, 1st July or as needed. The legal advice is that we don't need commission's approval, but I feel that given where we are, this is such an important issue. This is one of the most important work that our agency does. So having commission's guidance and approval, formal approval, will be very helpful for us.
I think you raise a good point, Dr. Dukes. Let's phrase the motion to allow that extra latitude. So I guess I'm asking for the commission's, someone on the commission to make a motion to extend the Maryland deadline for the federal free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, from March 1st to June 1st, 2023, and give the agency discretion to extend it beyond June 1st, 2023, if they deem it appropriate in their professional judgment.
So moved.
2024.
2024, yes, thank you, Commissioner Wormack. I'm living in the past.
So
2024.
moved with that amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposition or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it.
I
Thank
have
you,
a
Mr.
que-
Dorset.
I have a question, please, Chair Moss. Do we still have a quorum?
Yes, I see Commissioners Williams, Dukes, Thompson, Agu, Warmack, Serrano, Burnham, Robinson, and me. So we've got 9 out of 11.
Okay, because I don't see
I've
Commissioner
been
Serrano
having
anymore.
issues.
Oh, and Commissioner Tabor, we've got 10. Sorry, I didn't see you there on my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we've got almost everybody here.
And I want to thank commissioners for your approval. And I just want to make sure that this is just for 2024. And hopefully things will be better by 2025 and we'll be in much better situation. Thank you for your guidance.
And Mr. Coley and Ms. Wardlaw, if you could please share with the commission your communications plan, that would be great. Commissioner Agu, thank you for stepping up and offering yourself. I think the term you used was tribute. But anything you can do, Commissioner Agu, and please, agency team, please take Commissioner Agu up on his offer. And the same for me at College Bound. I'm already working closely with the agency, but the more we can do to push this out, the better. All right. Our next topic is from Dr. Dow's department, the Department of Academic Affairs. We will be hearing from Dr. Barbara Schmertz in the Office of Research and Policy Analysis. So Dr. Dow and Dr. Schmertz, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you again. I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Schmertz but let me briefly just introduce this topic. As you heard from Secretary Rye at last month's meeting, we have a new dashboard up regarding opening fall enrollment. Barbara is going, Dr. Schmertz, excuse me, is going to walk you through that dashboard. And then we also thought it would be a good opportunity to just highlight a few additional dashboards that her research office is producing so that you are aware and know how to navigate those resources. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. Schmertz. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to speak to you today, Chair Motz, Dr. Rye, commissioners. Many of you I had an opportunity to interact with and meet in the summer, which seems eons ago, as we prepare for 2024, as was pointed out, that we're nearing 2024 at every moment. I'm very excited and honored to share this particular dashboard, but I do want to take advantage of my opportunity to be in front of you to just give you a brief orientation because we have so many tools from our office that I think I hear the questions every month in the commission meeting, and I feel like this kind of data that we have at your fingertips is worth giving you a tour. So when I do this, I'm not going to actually start from the dashboard itself, but to show you how to find the dashboard and many others. So I'm going to ask respectfully that you save your questions for the end, and those questions can be both the functionality of any of our work, the scope of our work, and or the data for the opening fall enrollment dashboard. So just to give you some context, because I think if you understand this data dashboard in the context of what we get from our institutions, again, this can be a great foundation for the ways in which we continue to work together. Our office, a team of 4, so a mighty but small office, receive unit record data from the institutions. And by that, I mean every record, every row of that data set represents a unit of measure. So for our financial aid file, which is actually different from Al Dorsett's data, amazingly, but it's a row per award to a student. And so that data that we work with is millions and millions of rows. It represents from 2013 to the present. We have enrollment data in a similar format, degree data in a similar format, course taking, non-credit participation in the non-credit workforce sector, teachers, educators, whole host of data. We also get data in aggregated form. The institutions count the thing up for us that we want them to count up, and they give it to us in aggregation. Not terribly sexy, very functional. The opening fall enrollment data is just that. They quickly do a summation of their enrollment at a point in time in fall 2023, so that we as an agency, the state, legislators can understand, as Dr. Rye has already hinted, the health or the challenges facing our institutions from an enrollment perspective. The last big bucket of data we get is what we would consider qualitative or report data. Often these are mandates. You will meet Dr. Lynn, our associate director, in January when she presents the performance accountability report, which is many, many words given to us qualitatively from the institutions, and we then sum it up and present to you. So that data context allows us a lot of opportunity and power. We, of course, do mandates. That can fill a decent amount of our time. We produce these dashboards. They are not by mandate, but they are an expected product. And lastly, we have started to, over the last few years, do proactive work. We've actually done a quasi-experimental study of the effects of financial aid in the state of Maryland, and you will see that when I give you a tour briefly of our webpage. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to take you, as I said, my promise is to take you from the beginning of the agency's webpage so that you can see how our work can be accessed this way. So I cannot see you anymore, but I'm presuming that you all can see the main page of the dashboard. So as you know, from anybody who's come here, we have lots of boxes. Our box sits squarely in the middle, and we do try to provide some simple links to some of our key dashboards, but I'm going to take you to our main page. It provides a brief description of our office. Here again, I want to highlight our staff. It's me, my colleague, Dr. Lynn, Associate Director, and 2 analysts who have joined the team in the last 8 months. And I think an important thing to emphasize as another team member.
Dr. Schmertz, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It did not go to the next screen. It did not take you to the next page. For some
all right,
reason.
then I will reshare. thank you for interrupting me.
Sorry.
That's okay. Let me stop sharing. So I'm now going to go to our office page. So this may occur again, I hope not, as we launch the dashboard. And again, somebody just needs to alert me. My staff, a team of 4, plus Dr. Ann Kellogg. I think this is an important thing to emphasize. Again, I've heard commissioners ask questions about the linkage between higher education and the labor market. We partner with the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, and Dr. Kellogg sits squarely between both agencies, both working in MHEC and working in MLDS. And MLDS receives MHEC data to answer longitudinal research questions, as well as MSDE data and others. And so she's a really important partner in our data. So I'll just quickly scroll down farther. We have a whole collapsible table of content that we produce on a regular basis. And the highlight and the reason I'm here before you primarily today is to show you the opening fall enrollment dashboard. So I know that that did not launch. So I'm going to stop sharing and show you the dashboard. And here we go. So the dashboard launches, it's a series of tabs. This dashboard, the opening fall enrollment, dashes with opens with some important context. How is Maryland doing is, of course, very important, but we have the added highlight of contextualizing that within the national context using National Student Clearinghouse data that we receive from the website. So again, Dr. Rye hinted at this in the November meeting. Maryland is seeing an increase in overall enrollment, and that is many of our benchmarks, we are higher than the national trend line, which is very encouraging for Maryland. So to navigate through our dashboards, you can either use an arrow key or a menu at the bottom. And we do provide users for every one of our dashboards, literally a training kind of tool on how to use the dashboard. If one skims over this, you can figure out many of the items. So as I mentioned, the data we get behind this dashboard is in aggregated form, and so it has less ability to be interacted with. This is, as it shows, just the breakdown of fall enrollment. Again, it's snapshot data showing through the 3 key segments: the public 4 years, the community colleges, and the state-aided independent institutions. And this feature, the tooltip, allows you to receive more information about the data. And so as you can see from this, not surprisingly, public 4 years primarily have an undergraduate enrollment of full-time. Conversely, the community colleges filled with part-time students. At the graduate level, we see a combination of full and part-time by segment. This is a fall to fall comparison rate of change. And as has been indicated, we are seeing increases in overall enrollment. And this has really been driven by a healthy rebound from the community colleges. The next tab I show you will show you a trend line. But you can see that the community colleges have seen a percentage growth of approximately 8%. Public 4 years are also seeing growth, and the state-aided independent institutions have seen a bit of a downturn. So again, you get with my session a twofer in that I am not only showing you this very important data, but I'm also showing you some of the functionality. So the beauty of this dashboard is you can see the overall trend, and you can see, as just was indicated, the public 4 year institutions and the community colleges have seen the overall uptick. And then you can use a slicer and see how that trend may change over time. And so you can see, for example, that while graduate student enrollment has perhaps vacillated, there's been a strong surge around the pandemic. The last tab I will show you of data, well, there's 2 more tabs. This is first-time full-time enrollment. I think commissioners both understand that this is an important signal to institutions around enrollment intensity, but has been echoed by many of the commissioners, is by far not the norm of what college going can look like in the state of Maryland. But this is often used federally. Obviously, there's a lot of financial aid tied around being a full-time student. And so this shows that we've seen, again, a growth of first-time, full-time undergraduate enrollment, which is a trend that is a great bellwether of perhaps what's to come with a resurgence in enrollment at the institutions. So I close with just showing you on this dashboard that we do this, again, very standard functionality of giving people data definitions, allowing people to really dig in and understand our data and its limitations, our sources. We're very transparent. And then I think most important to our users and very different from our more static publications is that anyone who comes here can download the data in a usable format so that they can manipulate the data in Excel, pull down perhaps their own institutional, so you noticed from this dashboard, it is very big picture, but this downloadable data is at the institution level. It is at the full-time and part-time enrollment intensity level. It actually gives the trend data. And so there's a lot to be consumed just from this tab alone. And I wouldn't be surprised if those who are stakeholders who are more familiar with our dashboards are perhaps going right here to perhaps just grab the data that they need. So I'm going to stop sharing this tab, but I do want to, I'm very excited if everybody will give me just a bit more time. Oh, I will happily take a question.
That was a
Commissioner
mistake.
Agu and then
man.
Commissioner Serrano.
So
Sorry, that was a mistake. I apologize. I am happy to wait.
If everybody would allow me 2 more minutes to show them one more dashboard, I think that people will be very excited by this dashboard that is very exciting and new to our unit. So let me just bring it up since I know you are not going to be able to go with me. And that is our those that complete workforce training. And I believe that is, just want to make sure I'm grabbing the right one. I'm going to reduce my choices so that I can't make any mistakes. Okay, here we go. Because I want to again highlight both the hard work of my team in producing these amazing materials, but the way and the depth by which these dashboards can really let people play with the data. So this is an exciting, Maryland is recognized around the country as being a leader in collecting data at the unit record level on students completing workforce training. We've now doing a completer collection. We're about to announce and a course registration / enrollment collection. So again, many of the same kind of contextual framing tools. But what I want to take you to is, and with these larger dashboards, we do provide a table of contents. We are able to, through this dashboard, allow users to digest the data in many different ways. First, there's a slicer for each year. So one can gather what things look like in 2021, the 2 years of comparison, and we will continue to stack our data this way. You can get a statewide portrait of where we are contributing to this non-credit space. And you can see that predominantly in the state, we are producing healthcare, people in the healthcare field, followed by business and professional all the way down. You can also then get a sense of how their licensure distributions are, as well as non-credit, as its very hallmark, is a short, intense amount of time. And so you can see that what we consider long within these measures, just to create some boundaries, is really not terribly long, which is, of course, one of the beautiful and kind of exudable things about workforce education. So a really fun thing is that you then can select any college and see what they're doing in comparison to the state. So here the faded line continues to be the state, and the larger line continues to be Hagerstown proportion. And so one can get a sense of who's contributing in this space. Anybody who's aware of Allegheny College as a community college knows that in the credit space, it is considered a rather small institution, but it is a leader in the state in terms of producing workforce, people completing programs in this non-credit workforce space. So I could go on and on, but I'm going to wrap up so that I can answer questions. Oh, let me just point out, as I've emphasized, The data that sits behind this dashboard as well is also downloadable, as they all are in our dashboards. And so again, people can consume the data in ways that may not be visualized, they want to do more with, or again, pull out their institution data. So I'm going to stop sharing. I know we have a larger meeting ahead and I want to make time for Derek and others, but I want to, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not the one who calls on people. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Agu, sorry, Commissioner Serrano, then Commissioner Agu, then Commissioner Thompson.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. On the, do we know like roughly who's kind of the audience? Like who are the biggest consumers of the dashboard, like the dashboards? Who, from the feedback that you've received from like different institutions, who says, I really like your dashboard, I use it for the X, Y, and Z? So that's kind of one thing. Another thing just about dashboards, I feel like I love them. I personally love them. I'm a big data guy, so I love the overflow of data. One thing I would suggest is sometimes it feels like it's too much data. Instead of having like I don't know, like something on every part of the dashboard to say this is what the data could be used for, or having a tab that says download. So if you're interacting with it, you find some great discovery, and you want, like, rather than just kind of screenshotting it, like if you could have a way to download that you can export it to a slide or something that you could be used, just so you can have it. Because a lot of times, like, I use dashboards and I kind of find this accidental discovery, and it's just like, I'm like, wow, this is amazing, and I want to use it for something, but then I don't have any way of recording it besides just using a screenshot. So I guess that's my kind of thing. I love the dashboard. Again, I love the data, how it's laid out. I just think I'm just, my question is more about like who the audience, who are the biggest kind of consumers of this?
Sure. Great question. The feedback we've received is our primary audiences are the institutions themselves, institutional leadership. We get a lot of questions from institutional researchers. The reason we do so much work on the technical notes and the sort of the definition setting is because we do get questions. How have you defined this? Which variables have you used? So we know that institutional researchers are taking our data and then maybe at the behest of the president or leadership or for other purposes, they're taking the data, again, maybe very well in the end be using the downloadable data for their own purposes. I think another big audience is the legislative body. We meet with and have gotten questions from our DLS colleagues, those who are analysts and are preparing materials. We are, as you know, Chair Mott's emphasized, we have not developed these to be particularly student-centric. Our consumer of this could very well be. We have received less inquiry from actually families or students about what this data might mean for them. But if I think there are, I don't know if there are any commissioners who remember the literal book we used to publish, but we used to make a 50-page booklet, mail it out to a bunch of stakeholders. People would file it away on their desk and pull it out. And so that audience is the same audience we really tailor this to. So that was legislators, their staff, the governor's office, college presidents, college institutional researchers. I think the other space that we do get some inquiry is from other state higher education authorities, whether it's because and researchers. I just got an inquiry from a faculty member at the University of Virginia who wants to know if there's any access to our non-credit data because of a scholarly pursuit. So I think there's a number of kinds of people mucking about in there. So I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Serrano.
Another audience is Dr. Rai. I don't go to Dr. Smur's office anymore. And I'm very, very thankful to Dr. Smur's and her team. As you know, it's a very small team, and the amount of work and the kind of expertise, technical expertise that's needed to get this done is just absolutely amazing, with constraints of not only human resources, but technological tools and all that. Within that, what they have been able to create is just absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Agu, then Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Warmack.
Sure, I have a ton of questions, and I'm trying not to take the whole. But first, and this is more of a request, and I talked about this with Dr. Dow. I would love to see if we could set up maybe just a smaller meeting with your team and and interested commissioners maybe early next year, just so we can kind of take a spin. And the only commissioner may be me, that's fine. But I would love to do that because I think you have so much data that can inform a number of decisions that we make. I think getting a tutorial about how we can best use it and go through it, I think will be helpful. I know, at least for me. So it's just a request. And we can kind of put this on the calendar, and I'm happy to help coordinate that for fellow commissioners. One of my questions was on the last 2 minutes that you did with us around workforce you have certificate completions. I was curious how this data interacts with Maryland DOL data, because what we have here is completions, which is really good. We need to know that. But the ideal piece is, all right, what happens to those people once they get out?
Right. Are they making a difference?
Where? How does this data interact with data that DOL has, from whether it be a UI wage record or something like that? Is it a little bit? Is it a lot? Is it not at all? I'm just curious what that looks like.
So I will answer the literal how, in that the agency that is centered to that is the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center. So not only do they get the K through 12 data and the MHEC data, but they get the data from the Department of Labor and are answering workforce questions. I am woefully unaware right now of what they have produced, specifically tying. They have the capacity to. And so if your other question is, how is it generally looking? I can find out for you. In fact, what I neglected to mention at the beginning of this presentation is I do anticipate sending out an email through Debbie to all of you to kind of walk you through. I went to this dashboard. I went to this dashboard. This is where you can find my work if you want to bookmark it. So I can add to that a better answer to your this other how question of what is MLDS doing with this data and how are they finding the data quality. I know they did a test of the data quality and visibility into the labor data, because as we built the workers, the completers collection, we wanted to know, it's a good test of data quality, right? Are we getting good unique ID numbers to be able to match? Are there other data sources, because they use both the data from labor, but they can actually also match on identity resolution using driver's license data and so forth. And so they gave it the thumbs up. We actually did a pilot year, and even in the pilot year where half the community colleges participated, the data quality was good enough that we didn't really have a lot of concerns. And so this is a very new collection. The reason there's only 2 years worth of Slicer is because there's only 2 years worth of data. So what I don't know, I mean, the beauty of these programs is they are rather short term. And so there's likely people who've completed even the last 2 years who are well in the workforce. And I know there's work being produced by MLDS on that front. So let me get some answers to you on what that's looking like. And then I love the idea of another meeting, and maybe we can actually even bring in MLDS at some point.
We actually would. I would would request that. I think that would be super helpful I know for me personally, as well as I think for other members of the commission. I have other questions, but I will yield to my fellow commissioners.
Okay.
I know I can go on about this.
I'll add one thing. We were in Washington, D.C. yesterday at Lumina Foundation, and this whole conversation was going on, between alignment between workforce and higher education, and the data issues like this, other states, where they are, and I was smiling. I knew what you have done, Dr. Schmertz and MLDS, and the issue that's there connecting with the Department of Labor data. I think that's doable. Given where we are, it shouldn't be too complicated. So as a state, again, we are in a very, very good situation. Given, what policies we want to bring, where we want to go, this data infrastructure is so critical. And because of all this good work from your team, I think state is in a very good position.
And I'll say, for that meeting yesterday, Secretary Wu from Labor was also there all day. And so she's a ready partner to do a lot of this. So again, thank you, Dr. Schmertz.
Sure.
Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Schmertz. This is great information and a great update. I couldn't help but think about the overlap of information that we may already have and how you bring it forward. For example, there's a lot of information in the fact book. So how does it work behind the scenes, so to speak, to pull that information forward? Or do you just recommend for users to go to the fact book site and do their magic there? Do you overlap and bring up, or
yes?
How does that work?
I
Thank you.
skipped over a very important detail, which is that data book that you're referencing that we used to publish as a book. Every single
Yes.
one of those sections is now an interactive dashboard.
Wonderful.
So, yes, so that table of contents of enrollment and retention and graduation and faculty and finance and private career schools are all their own dedicated dashboard with multiple tabs and downloadable data. So it's sort of the best of both worlds, except it's not a
Yes.
pretty book with a cover, a color cover. So no, we've ideally made the effort much less. It's just that I skipped over sort of the overall organization of the page, but I will emphasize that when I send out the email.
Well, thank you. I think it's great work, and look forward to all of the updates and more information. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Wormack?
Thank you, Dr. Schmertz. This is excellent information, and I appreciate all of the work that's gone into this. I too have a lot of questions about the data, and thank you, Ms. Thompson, Commissioner Thompson, for asking that question, because I was trying to relate this to how does this information that we saw today relate to our benchmarks for the state, the Maryland completion agenda, and where are we? But you're suggesting that that's already in the fact book. And then I'd love to see the comparison data of how we look right against our other communities, our bordering states, and how we look in terms of enrollment, et cetera. And then finally, how this looks in terms of how are we financing our students, right? So there's got to be some overlap in there. So I too am interested. I'm so glad Commissioner Agu brought up that we probably need a little small group to kind of go into this, because it really can help us and help Dr. Rye, Secretary Rye, advance some of the initiatives that we need to advance for the future of the state plan. So thank you so much for excellent work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right, well, thank you. Oh, Dr. Rye.
Chair Moss, thank you very much. So while in this presentation, I think the dashboard was important and that got a lot of attention. But I think the enrollment probably, I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost. Enrollment last 10 years has been a challenge for the state nationally. It's a very good news. In Maryland has grown by 4.1%. That is very good compared to 2.1% nationally. The other thing I see is community college enrollment going up by 8%. Community colleges in Maryland have about 100,000 students. First generation students access issue, and 8% increase there is also, I think, is a very, very good news for us. So this is being shared with all segments of higher education, and the dashboard will be shared with all segments of higher education. They will use it. And I think, again, a collaboration platform with all the institutions. So great news there. I did want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the dashboard.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Wright, and thank you, Dr. Schmertz, so much for a wonderful presentation and for all the work that you and your team have done behind the scenes to make this such a user-friendly dashboard. I think a lot of us are going to jump on and take advantage of that small group training. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Our final agenda item is an update from Mr. Derek Coley, the legislative director at MHEC, about the very well-attended and informative campus safety summit this past Monday that was co-led by the University System of Maryland and MHEC. And I want to thank my fellow commissioner, Commissioner Wormack, for attending. She brings a lot of relevant experience, and I think she would join me in saying it was very well done. Mr. Coley.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair Motz. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. This was an inaugural meeting, and under the leadership of Acting Secretary Rye and Chair Motz, it was a joint partnership with the University System of Maryland under Chancellor Jay Perriman and also Chair Linda Gooden with respect to this idea. Some of you may be aware that, of course, there was a shooting at Morgan State University and also Bowie State University, but on the actual campuses. But there were also two other shootings in the state of Maryland. One was at Frostburg University, right off campus, and also Salisbury University, where students were involved in terms of those incidents and shootings as well. It was brought to the attention under their leadership that, hey, we need to bring all of our institutions of higher education together across the state of Maryland to address this. I also want to say thank you to MICUA and also the Maryland Association of Community Colleges as well for working in tandem to bring their members to the Campus Safety Summit, as well as Morgan State and also the College of Southern Maryland representatives were there as well. There were over 125 attendees. There were 34 institutions across the state of Maryland. And some of the key points, there were 4 bullet points that we focused on, which were applying data and intelligence to campus safety, looking at student affairs with respect to safety. We had a panel discussing best practices, focus on prevention and response. Also, we were fortunate to have representatives from Michigan State University who had an active shooter on their campus as well, who was not a student. They also shared best practices and lessons learned. And then finally, to close out the Campus Safety Summit, we had a president's panel. In the first piece, we were had a presentation by Dale Watson, who's a former national counterterrorism leader with the FBI, who stressed the importance of balancing between over-policing and also creating a police state on campuses. He also shared that it's important and critical that institutions work with local law enforcement authorities in order to monitor and also assess campus threats in a timely manner for both intervention and also potential preparation for the response if an incident does happen on our campuses and so forth. In terms of the student affairs panel, it was quickly discussed with respect to mental health screening, but also the importance of campus inclusion, whereby students feel as if they're part of the campus fabric, and the focus with respect to creating these relationships and being proactive as between the administration and also student groups, but not just the student groups, but also individual students as well, and relationship building on the actual campuses, creating a mental health safety net in a sense where you have counseling services that are readily available to talk to those students who may be feeling isolated or having those difficulties and mental health challenges, to make sure that you're ahead of the curve with respect to campus safety as well. The Michigan State representatives in their presentation, they shared with us that there were 2 key takeaways in their panel that they discussed. One was the importance of a unified response, a unified command response, not only from the safety aspect of clearing the buildings and making sure the students who have been injured or those students who are still sheltering in place are actually brought to safety, but also a unified response as relates to news and social media messaging, because oftentimes during these incidences, there are issues of misinformation as well, going out on social media about what's happening on campuses and so forth. And the second piece, which also ties into the piece regarding mental health as well, is the need after the incident and also towards the end for individuals to begin discussing how to go about doing reconciliation to begin the healing process on campuses as well, which is also important. And I want to close out with respect to the president's message. The president's panels discussed the complex nature of maintaining campus safety, both on and surrounding campuses, because as we all know, students are very mobile. More importantly, it was brought to light that there are different apps, again, looking at the critical nature of communicating with students to maintain their safety. There are various apps that campuses and institutions have to be aware of, that students receive alerts in terms of crime issues and safety issues in and around the campus community and so forth. And those apps also share updates. So the university presidents discussed the importance of making sure that the student affairs divisions and also the marketing and outreach communication departments on campuses were aware of the various applications that students use to receive their information as well. Again, this was the inaugural meeting in terms of the inaugural summit. It was agreed it would not be the last. More importantly, one key takeaway with respect to going forward was, one, the assessment in terms of the video camera systems. Dr. Rye brought this up on various campuses and so forth, how are they monitored? Who has access to the video camera systems on campuses? But also one more critical key takeaway with respect to funding for institutions was that there is a current notice that's gone out regarding grants to states for school emergency management, or GSEM, which falls under the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And all of the participants at the summit were able to receive a brochure in terms of applying for those grant funds to increase their video surveillance, also blue lights on campus, license plate readers, and things of that nature as well. Thank you, Chair Motz.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. And I realize I was calling you the legislative director. That's one of many things you do. You're actually the director of all external relations. So my apologies. Commissioner Warmack and then Commissioner Serrano.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Coley. And I just want to thank Secretary Rye and Ms. Motz for having that session this week. It was a very important session given the state of our environment around safety and particularly around our students. I will add, and I don't want to duplicate what Mr. Coley said, that obviously, funding campus safety as well as, and I think that assessment and a coordinated effort across our institutions across the state would help all of our institutions respond. It's, as they said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it may happen on your campuses, and the safety of our students and our employees serving on our institutions is so important to me. So that was one important aspect that I got out of it. So I really appreciate that you took that on. I hope it will not be the last session that we do, because we really do need to come together and coordinate all those efforts across all of our institutions, including our independent institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Serrano, and then Commissioner Agu.
Yeah. So I guess one of the, I'm kind of kicking myself for not being able to go on Monday, but I saw the news coverage of it, and I thought it was great. It was we got the media, we got out there, we got folks together. But I think the one question I had is is there, do you think, is there an appetite for some kind of barrier analysis or some kind of audit of what are we doing now, kind of check, a formal, basically a report of where we're at now, where the gaps are, where we could look for different stakeholders at the state, maybe federal levels, to try to revamp that. Because I love the idea of meeting, but I wanted to kind of move a little bit more to the idea of a report or some kind of policy or framework or strategy.
Commissioner Serrano, that's a key point. I think one of the critical takeaways was creating the baseline. First and foremost, with respect to video surveillance, if you can imagine during an incident, if there is no command and control structure to actually know where either a bomb threat or a active shooter or any type of disturbance or incident on campus is happening, you have to be able to have eyes, in a sense, with respect to multiplying factor of video cameras. It was brought by Chief Mitchell from University of Maryland College Park. They have over 1,000 video cameras alone at College Park. The flagship institution has a different resource structure with respect to that type of video surveillance versus some of the community colleges and other smaller independents and even smaller schools within the system. However, to your point, there is an appetite to do a baseline assessment regarding what's currently in place, some of the tabletop exercises in terms of responding to incidences, making sure that those are being implemented and that everyone practices in order to make sure they have a solid plan going forward. You can't begin practicing during an incident, Commissioner Serrano. So to your point, the discussion is moving forward. A lot of the public safety chiefs and also public safety directors, police chiefs and directors said, thank you so much for creating this conversation so all of us can be unified across the state, having the discussion and moving forward. So there is a movement forward, Commissioner Serrano.
My question was actually very similar. As usual, Dr. Serrano's ahead of me. My question was more definitely a report, but also my question is the who, kind of who will carry this work going forward. I'm not sure if there's, and if I missed this during your remarks, I apologize. If there is kind of a coordinating body of public safety officials, is there is that a role that potentially we kind of set as being the convener, and obviously this one's coming to the table. But I'm curious kind of who will be the who going forward, beyond, of course, the individual institutions themselves. So I think we recognize this as a systemic issue.
No,
Let me take that one, Derek. A very important point, and this is exactly, we started discussing that. Within the USM system, there's a group of all chief safety officers. They meet, periodically. But we want to have a statewide group of all safety expert kind of affinity group. MHAC has affinity group of other entities, other groups. So we are looking at how best to address that, where statewide safety groups and provosts, they come together, look at best practices, and maybe even look at sharing resources, joint training. You will never have unlimited resources, right? But if there are institutions that are in close proximity, if they know each other's infrastructure, and if unfortunately an event happens, they could be a joint response team, joint support team to each other. So those are some of the things we'll be doing. As Mr. Cooley explained, Michigan State University, when they had the event happen February of this year, in all publications, they have been given credit because they had the textbook response. Unfortunately, they lost lives, but their response was the best possible. In order to get to the best possible response, they had hired a vice president of safety just a few months before. And when this person came, he did a security audit. So in security audit, it wasn't clear to anyone how many cameras are there. And some of the cameras were monitored by academic units, some academic deans, some by here. So there was no coordinated understanding. So they had fortunately done that work prior to this incident. And that helped them to respond very quickly and take care of the situation. So we will have to look at doing something similar here, each institution doing that kind of security audit and knowing where is what, and then best practices, see where the gaps are, and how do we get the resources to fill those gaps.
Let me just make a request and a recommendation. One, if this could be a quick update on this, maybe in our February meeting, I think might be helpful, just to know where we stand here. I think I know that'll be helpful for me. Wouldn't have to be long. I think the other is, and also a point that I think Mr. Coley, you made earlier on. Of course, there's the how do you respond as an event is happening, after an event happens, but also preventive services. And so how do we make sure this is not purely a public safety conversation, although obviously that's a huge part of it, but also folks who are giving those, whether it be mental health services, other things, wraparounds that might hopefully prevent one of these horrors from happening on one of our campuses. I would encourage whatever coordinating body is doing that those officials are also included in that discussion.
I would just add that it was very much a statewide effort. And while it was hosted by the University System of Maryland at their building right next to the aquarium in downtown Baltimore, it was attended by almost every institution. 2-year and 4-year had attendees. The chief of the Morgan State Police Department was there. Some of the 2-year and 4-year presidents were on panels, or vice presidents of student affairs. And it was really heartening to see MHAC, our agency, be the coordinating agency that it was meant to be when it was established 35 years ago in 1988. We really were working alongside our partners, doing a convening, bringing folks together. And my hope is that in the coming year, in 2024, we're able to have other convenings, particularly interested in one on student success. I've talked to some of you about this, but one that's really focused on retention and graduation rates. Again, as a convener, as a learning best practices from others within our state and bringing out experts from outside the state. So congratulations to the team at MHEC for executing an idea and really bringing folks together on a really important topic. On that note, I don't see anything else on the agenda except adjournment. So if nobody has anything else, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
I imagine there are no abstentions or nays. So thank you, everyone, for your public service, particularly to my fellow volunteer commissioners. Thank you for your volunteer service to the state. Hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday and look forward to seeing you in January. We have our next meeting dates. Our next meeting is Wednesday, January 24th. It's the fourth Wednesday of the month, as they usually are, unless an exception is noted. We will aim to meet in person at MHEC and in our 7th floor conference room, our regular spot. There always will be a Zoom option if folks aren't able to join in person. So have a wonderful holiday and see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair Mott.
Happy holidays.